thought I was hired to cook for a family of paranoid billionaires waiting out the apocalypse.
But they weren't hiding from a nuclear bomb.
They were hiding from the forest itself.
My name's Arthur, and for 22 years, I was an executive chef.
I didn't work in standard restaurants, though.
I worked in private estates, super yachts, and hidden compounds for the ultra-wealthy.
I was totally used to the bizarre demands of the elite.
I knew how to keep my head down, source white truffles in the dead of winter, and, most importantly, keep my mouth shut. But nothing in my 2 decades of catering to the 1% could have prepared me for the Sterling family.
Or the concrete tomb they built deep beneath the Appalachian mountains.
The job offer came at the absolute lowest point of my life.
My marriage had collapsed under a mountain of medical debt, and I was staring down bankruptcy.
My little girl, Maya, had been diagnosed with a rare neurological condition.
The experimental treatments weren't covered by insurance, and they were catastrophically expensive.
I was terrified of losing her. I was drowning in final notices when a man in a tailored charcoal suit just showed up at my cramped apartment.
He didn't even bother to introduce himself.
He just stood there in the doorway and handed me a thick manila envelope.
Inside was a contract for a highly classified 2-year culinary residency.
The rules were absolute.
No internet, no phone calls, and 0 contact with the outside world for 24 months.
In exchange, they'd deposit $2.5 million into a trust for Maya.
The money would be completely untouchable by my creditors.
Her life would be saved and her future secure. I signed the papers before the ink on his pen had even dried.
The trip out there was completely designed to mess with my head.
They flew me on this private charter to some tiny, unmarked airstrip out in the Virginias. The whole flight was dead silent, just leaving me alone with my thoughts.
Soon as we touched down, they loaded me into the back of this heavy, windowless armored USV.
I sat in pitch black for what felt like 6 or 7 hours. Smooth highway turned into rough gravel, and I knew I was completely cut off. Eventually, the road just turned into this jarring, uneven dirt track. I could hear the tires crunching over thick branches and heavy brush just scraping against the steel doors. We were heading deep into the ancient, unmapped pockets of the Appalachians. When the truck finally stopped, they escorted me out into this biting, freezing night air. I barely had a second to take in these massive black silhouettes of ancient pines all around us. The sheer scale of the woods out there was just overwhelming. Before I could even get my bearings, they rushed me onto this heavy industrial freight elevator. It was built right into the side of a massive granite cliff. The steel doors slammed shut, cutting off the wind, and it felt like stepping into a vault. We started going down, and man, we went down for a long time. I just stood there watching the digital readout above the door track our depth. 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, just dropping straight down into solid bedrock. The deeper we went, the heavier the air felt, just pressing right on my chest. I closed my eyes and gripped my bag, reminding myself about the money waiting for Maya. Going down that shaft really felt like burying my old life. When those doors finally opened at 300 feet, I stepped out into an absolute marvel. Instead of some cold military base, the place looked like a 5-star luxury hotel. They had vaulted ceilings, artificial daylight, and rich mahogany walls everywhere. I walked through those pristine hallways, just trying to wrap my head around how they built this deep underground. You could feel this low, constant hum from the massive air filtration system vibrating in the floor. It was an engineering masterpiece, buried in total isolation. And then they finally led me into the kitchen, where I'd be spending the next 2 years of my life. It was a total masterpiece, packed with gleaming stainless steel and heavy-duty induction ranges. It was a chef's absolute dream, completely cut off from the world.
The next morning, I finally met the man who bought 2 years of my life.
Elias Sterling. He made his fortune in global logistics, but down here, he just felt like a ghost. His wife, Eleanor, looked completely hollowed out, like she was heavily medicated just to get through the day. Their 2 adult kids barely spoke. They just drifted through the Booker. I figured they were just hardcore doomsday preppers waiting out a nuclear winter.
But things didn't add up.
There was no talk of politics, no news feeds on the screens. My routine was strict. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, and a massive multi-course dinner at 8. I poured my heart into the food, trying to find some normal rhythm. But the family ate in near total silence. There was absolutely no joy in it. Honestly, they ate like people who were just waiting for an execution. The first real crack in the facade happened down in the hydroponics bay. It was this sprawling wing on the lowest level, built to provide fresh produce indefinitely. That's where I met Silas, the resident botanist. He was a brilliant agricultural engineer, but the guy was a nervous wreck. He always looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Silas was constantly on edge. He'd flinch at the smallest sounds and obsessively check the structural integrity monitors mounted on the greenhouse walls.
I thought he was just cracking from the isolation.
One afternoon, I went down to grab some fresh basil and heirloom tomatoes for a salad. I found Silas standing near the far wall, staring dead ahead at the main air intake. It was a massive titanium ventilation grate that pulled filtered air from 300 feet above. He was gripping his blowtorch, his hands shaking, pointing right at the steel mesh. I stepped closer to the grate, squinting into the dim light. Poking through the heavy steel mesh was this tiny, pale green tendril. It looked like a root, but completely drained of color. It was almost translucent, like something that had grown in absolute darkness. It was no thicker than a piece of twine, but the tip of it was pressing against the solid titanium. Silas didn't say a word to explain it. He just raised his heavy industrial blowtorch and clicked it on. He bathed that tiny root in a fierce cone of blue flame. The root didn't just burn up like normal plant matter. It recoiled. I swear to you, it twitched and pulled back into the vent. It made this faint, high-pitched hissing sound that made my skin crawl. I stumbled back, demanding to know what the hell that thing was. Silas just turned off the torch, his chest heaving. He refused to even look me in the eye. He muttered that it was just some invasive subterranean mold. He told me to grab my vegetables and get back to the kitchen. But I saw his hands shaking. He wasn't dealing with mold. He was absolutely terrified. And over the next few months, the vibe in the bunker got incredibly heavy. The air filtration system seemed to be working overtime. It sounded like the machines were physically struggling to pull air down from the surface. And then, the sound started. It began as this faint, distant groaning in the middle of the night. I'd lie awake in the dark, just listening to the silence. It turned into a deep, resonant creaking echoing through the concrete walls. It sounded exactly like the hull of a submarine. Like we were groaning under immense pressure at the bottom of the ocean. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just the earth settling, but the noises weren't random. They were rhythmic and deliberate. Like something massive was slowly dragging itself against the outside of the bunker. Then came this heavy, dragging scrape right above my ceiling, followed by a massive thud that literally shook the floorboards under my feet. My kid's picture rattled on the nightstand. I couldn't just let it go, so I tried bringing it up the next night at dinner. The dining room was always dead quiet anyway, like a tomb.
I was serving them these perfect high-end courses, just waiting for the right moment to speak.
I stepped up to pour Elias a glass of Bordeaux. While the wine was pouring, I casually mentioned the noises we'd been hearing. I tried to play it cool, asking if there was some kind of seismic activity in the area. The second I said it, Elias just froze. He stopped swirling his wine, gripping the glass so hard his knuckles went white. The whole table went completely dead silent. Across the table, his wife dropped her silver fork right onto her plate. It clattered so loud in that quiet room. I saw her hands shaking like crazy as she stared down at her lap.
Elias slowly looked up at me.
His face was totally blank, but his eyes, man, they were just dark and exhausted. He looked like a guy who knew he was losing a war.
He didn't even blink. He just told me the mountains were old, and old things tend to shift in their sleep.
Then he straight up dismissed me from the room before I could say another word.
The whole illusion we were living in shattered a few days later.
It was the day Silas went missing. I'd gone down to the lower levels to grab some fresh rosemary for a roast. When I got to the hydroponics bay, the heavy doors were totally locked down. I swiped my card, but it just flashed red. My stomach just dropped as I stepped up to the glass window to look inside. I cupped my hands over the glass to see past the glare. The pristine indoor garden I was just in a few days ago was completely gone. The whole place was just in absolute ruins. I couldn't even process what I was looking at. That massive titanium grate Silas was so freaked out about? It was completely ripped out of the concrete wall. Like something just blew it open from the inside. Spilling out of that dark hole was an absolute nightmare. Just this massive, tangled web of pale roots. They were thick, man. Like giant snakes just pulsing in the water. They were already wrapping around the broken equipment. I was scanning the room, just praying Silas was hiding somewhere. But he wasn't there. The only thing left was his blowtorch, just sitting there, half underwater in the wreckage. Then my stomach completely dropped. I saw this long, muddy smear on the floor. It dragged right from the torch straight into that dark vent. Whatever broke in, it dragged him back out with it. I totally lost it. I started hammering on the emergency intercar. I was screaming for Elias, yelling that we had a breach. I kept shouting that Silas was gone, that we needed help.
Elias showed up a few minutes later.
He wasn't running. He was just walking with this creepy, calm vibe. His 2 kids were right behind him, quiet as ghosts. None of them even looked surprised. He just stepped right up to the glass. He stared at the flooded room and those massive roots. I was waiting for him to freak out or call security, but his face was just dead. He didn't even say a word to me. He just turned away from the window like it was nothing. He walked over to this heavy control panel on the wall, and he just started typing in a code. Suddenly, this loud grinding noise echoed through the hall. A massive steel blast door dropped right out of the ceiling. It slammed down over the window, sealing the whole wing off. Just like that, Silas was locked in there with those things. I grabbed his shoulder, demanding to know what the hell we were going to do. I asked if we were calling for an emergency extraction. He just looked at me, totally calm. He said the soil reclaimed him and told me to start cooking with canned goods. I couldn't take it anymore. Maya's money was secure, but I was trapped. Trapped in a concrete box with a family of absolute lunatics. And something impossible was breaching the walls. I had to know the truth. That night, after the family went to bed, I made my move. I crept through the silent corridors. The whole bunker felt like a tomb. I headed straight for Elias's private study.
I'd seen him enter the passcode weeks ago. I memorized the exact sequence. My hands were shaking as I punched in the numbers. I just prayed the light would turn green.
The heavy door clicked open.
I slipped inside and locked it behind me. The room was pitch black, except for the cold glow of a massive bank of monitors. I expected to see security feeds of the Cephas, maybe news networks or stock tickers. But the screens weren't showing anything like that. Nothing about the outside world at all. Instead, they were showing complex topographical maps and deep Earth sonar imaging.
The data was incredibly dense.
Just scrolling endlessly across the glowing screens.
I stepped closer to the screens. My mind was struggling to comprehend what I was looking at. The scale of the mapping was staggering. It showed endless layers of bedrock, right in the center of the main monitor. The bunker was represented by a small, glowing white box. It looked so incredibly fragile, just buried deep in the dark expanse of the mountain. Surrounding that little white box was a dense web of deep red lines. They filled the entire display. At first glance, I thought it was just a map of underground rivers, or maybe fault lines. But then I noticed the movement. The red lines were slowly constricting, wrapping tighter and tighter around the bunker. I looked at the scrolling data. It wasn't measuring geological pressure. It was measuring biological mass. I clicked on a file labeled Surface Botanical Observations. A video feed popped up on the screen. It was from a hidden camera somewhere in the deep woods above us. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. It showed a normal forest clearing at night. But then the ground started to heave, and massive roots burst from the dirt, wrapping around a boulder. Before my eyes, those roots secreted a thick, glowing green sap. It started sizzling, literally dissolving the solid rock like it was nothing. The trees in the background weren't just swaying in the wind. They were physically shifting, moving closer together, intertwining their branches into an impenetrable wall of wood and thorns. I couldn't look away, but I clicked on another file. It was an audio recording. I picked up the heavy headphones resting on the desk and slipped them on. It was an old man, a tribal elder, his voice crackling over the tape. He was warning Elias that all his money couldn't buy a shield from the earth. He said the Appalachians are the oldest mountains in the world, and they remember everything. The forest isn't just trees. It's one ancient breathing thing, and it's waking up. I ripped the headphones off, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Right then, that deep, rhythmic groaning sound started up again, louder than it had ever been. The floor beneath my feet trembled violently. A deafening crack echoed through the room, and a terrifying spiderweb of fractures shot across the solid concrete ceiling. Suddenly, the heavy door slid open. Elias stood there in his dark silk robe. He didn't look angry that I broke in. He just looked profoundly tired. Elias stepped fully into the room, his eyes locked on the glowing screens. He spoke softly, almost to himself. He said the whole world was looking up at the sky, worrying about missiles and the weather. They had no idea the real threat was right beneath their feet. I backed away from him, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sheer scale of the nightmare was finally taking shape. I could barely force the words out of my mouth. I just whispered, "What is happening to us?" Elias walked slowly over to the heavy desk,
running his fingers along the edge of the monitors.
He confessed he'd spent billions building this place.
He hired the best geologists and engineers money could buy.
He actually thought solid granite could keep them safe from the reclamation. But he had miscalculated.
He explained that the roots weren't just growing blindly in the dark.
They were drawn to the heat of the bunker.
They were drawn to the hum of the electricity.
And, most terrifyingly, they were drawn to us.
He turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw tears in his eyes.
The cold, untouchable billionaire was completely broken.
He told me we weren't hiding from a nuclear war.
We were hiding from the immune system of the planet itself.
The bunker was failing.
He described how the roots were secreting enzymes that ate right through the titanium.
They had completely encased the facility.
We were trapped at the bottom of an ocean of wood and dirt, and the hull was crushing.
Panic finally took over.
I raised my voice, demanding that we leave immediately. I told him we had to use the freight elevator. We had to get back to the surface before the walls caved in on us.
Elias just let out a dry, broken laugh that chilled me to the bone. He looked at me like I was a naive child.
He said the elevator shaft had collapsed 3 weeks ago. The roots had crushed it like a tin can. There was no surface to go back to. He looked back at the monitors, watching the red lines squeeze tighter.
In a whisper, he apologized for bringing me down here.
He admitted he just wanted his family to eat well. He wanted to pretend they were still in control at the end of the world.
Before I could even respond, another massive tremor violently shook the bunker.
The artificial lights flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness.
A second later, the emergency backup lights kicked on.
They cast a harsh, bloody crimson glow over the fractured room. Then came the sound. A horrific, screaming tear of thick titanium echoing down the hall. I ran out of the study and stared down the main corridor.
The heavy blast door sealing the hydroponics bay was bowing inward.
The steel was literally groaning.
Stretching and buckling under an impossible, unstoppable pressure. And then it just gave way. The door blew off its hinges with the force of a bomb.
Jagged shrapnel tore through the air.
A massive wave of dark, wet earth exploded into the corridor.
Thousands of writhing, pale roots surged forward like a tidal wave,
Crushing absolutely everything in their path.
The smell hit me instantly. It was the scent of ancient, undisturbed earth and wet pine, mixed with something sweet and metallic, like blood and tree sap. I didn't wait to see what happened to Elias. Pure, primal terror just took over. I turned and sprinted down that red-lit hallway as fast as my legs could carry me. I burst into my quarters, slamming the heavy steel door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely lock it. I frantically shoved my bed and dresser against the door, desperate to put anything between me and those roots. Even though I knew I was just barricading myself inside a tomb. I slumped against the barricade, trying to catch my breath. I knew it was entirely futile. Say, if they could crush a titanium blast door, my bedroom door wouldn't even slow them down. With nothing left to do, I pulled out my digital audio player. I don't know if anyone will ever find this, but I hit record anyway, to leave my final testament. I'm recording this now on my personal audio player. I honestly don't know if anyone's ever gonna find this. Maybe the forest just swallows this thing right along with me. Or maybe some future civilization digs us up millions of years from now. The walls in my room are starting to crack. I can actually see these pale, blind roots pushing right through the concrete. They're just tearing through the reinforced barriers like it's nothing. They're reaching out into the room now. It's like they're tasting the air, just feeling around for my body heat. It's this slow, terrifying invasion, and there's absolutely nothing I can do to stop it.
All the mechanical sounds of the bunker are totally gone. No more humming vents, no more metal groaning.
Now it's just this wet, sliding sound of the roots, and this deep, low vibration, like the mountain itself is breathing. I keep looking over at the picture of Maya on my nightstand. Her smile kind of cuts right through all this darkness.
She's gonna be taken care of, no matter what happens to me down here.
The money was transferred to her trust before I even stepped foot in this place. She's gonna grow up, get her treatments, and live a long, beautiful life. She'll probably think I abandoned her, but she'll be alive.
That's all that matters.
Knowing she's safe is the only comfort I've got left in this concrete tomb. I just look down, and there's this thick green sap starting to pool right under my feet. I'm leaving one last warning on this recorder. If you're listening to this and you live near the deep woods or hike the Appalachian trails, you need to listen to me very carefully. When the woods go completely silent and the birds stop singing, don't stop to admire the trees. Look at the ground. Look at the roots. They aren't just holding the trees up. They're holding us down, and they're tired of waiting. The woods are calling, but you really shouldn't answer, because they aren't calling you to visit. They're calling you home, to the soil. The cold concrete is completely gone now. It's been replaced by the heavy smell of wet pine and ancient, undisturbed earth. Honestly, it's kind of peaceful in a way. The fight is finally over. Elias really thought his billions could buy a permanent shield from the planet. He built this massive titanium fortress, thinking we could just outrun the very ground we walk on. But you can't outrun the Earth. The Earth doesn't care about our military-grade titanium walls or our high-end luxury kitchens. It doesn't care about our money or our arrogance. It just waits in the dark. And it always takes back what belongs to it. I'm leaving this recording behind, not as some desperate cry for help. Nobody is coming down here to save us. I'm leaving it as a warning. A testament to the absolute fools who tried to hide from the world in a concrete box. But my little girl, Maya, she's gonna be okay. Her medical trust is fully funded and completely untouchable. She's gonna grow up in the sun, far away from this underground nightmare. And honestly, that's all that matters to me now. So if you're out there listening to this, say you happen to live near the deep woods, or you like to hike those remote Appalachian trails, you need to listen to me very carefully. When the woods suddenly go completely silent, when the birds just stop singing out of nowhere, and the wind completely dies down, do not stop to admire the beauty of the trees. Look down at the ground beneath your boots. Look closely at the roots tearing through the dirt. They aren't just holding the forest up. They're holding us down. And they are finally tired of waiting for us to destroy everything. The woods are waking up, and they're calling out. But whatever you do, you shouldn't answer them. Because they aren't calling you to visit. They're calling you home, to the soil. It's funny how fast the earth just moves on. You look out over these mountains now, and you'd never even know we were here. Just an endless ocean of green, completely undisturbed. We build our little metal boxes, thinking we're so untouchable. We throw billions of dollars at the dirt, hoping it'll keep us safe. But the mountain doesn't care about our bank accounts. It doesn't care about titanium walls or high-tech air filters. It just waits. It's got all the time in the world, and we're just a blip on the radar. I don't know if anyone's ever going to dig this audio player up. Maybe the sap will just eat right through the casing. Or maybe some future civilization will find us down here. They'll probably wonder what kind of idiots locked themselves in a concrete box to hide from some trees.
Honestly, I can't even blame them.
But Maya's safe. And I gotta hold on to that. She's gonna grow up, get her treatments, and live a beautiful life.
She'll think I just walked out on. It breaks my heart. But it's the price I had to pay. So if you're out there listening to this, if you live anywhere near the deep woods or you like hiking these remote trails,
You need to listen to me very carefully.
When the woods go completely silent, when the birds just stop singing, and the wind dies down to nothing, do not stop to admire the view. Look closely at the ground beneath your feet.
look at the thick roots tearing through the dirt.
They aren't just holding those massive trees up, man.
They're holding us down in the dark. And trust me, they are getting really tired of waiting for us.
The woods are calling, but you really shouldn't answer.
I made it back to my room and shoved the heavy dresser against the door.
I know it's completely pointless.
If those things can rip through solid titanium, a piece of wood isn't going to slow them down.
I'm recording this on my personal audio player right now. I honestly don't know if anyone will ever find it.
Maybe the forest just swallows this thing right along with my bones.
Or maybe millions of years from now, someone digs us up. They'll probably wonder what kind of absolute fools locked themselves in a metal box to hide from some trees.
The walls in here are cracking open.
I can literally see these pale, blind roots pushing right through the concrete.
The machines are dead, so all I hear is this wet, sliding sound everywhere.
I keep looking over at the picture of Maya on my nightstand.
She's going to be taken care of.
The money cleared before I ever stepped foot in this place. She's going to grow up, get her treatments, and live a really beautiful life. She'll probably think her dad just abandoned her.
She'll think I ran away when things got tough. But she's going to be alive.
And honestly, that's the only comfort I've got left right now.
It makes all of this worth it.
There's this thick green sap starting to pool on the floor right under my feet.
It's sizzling against the concrete.
The mountain is finally breaking through.
If you're listening to this and you hike those remote trails up there, listen to me.
When the woods go dead silent, don't just stand there admiring the trees.
Look at the ground.
Look at the roots.
They aren't just holding the trees up. They're holding us down.
And they are so tired of waiting.
If you're listening to this, if you happen to live anywhere near the deep woods, or if you're just someone who likes to hike the remote trails of the Appalachians,
I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's gonna be a moment when the woods go completely silent.
It happens fast. The birds just stop singing, all at once.
And the wind just completely dies down to nothing.
When that happens, whatever you do, do not stop to admire the beauty of the trees.
Don't look up at the canopy. Don't get lost in the leaves.
That's exactly what they want you to do.
You need to look down. Look at the ground beneath your feet.
Look closely at the roots pushing up through the dirt. We've had it wrong this whole time. They're not just there to hold the trees up.
They're holding us down. They're keeping us exactly where they want us.
And after all these thousands of years,
They are so incredibly tired of waiting.
we cut too deep. We built too much. And now the earth is pushing back.
It's taking back everything we ever made. People always say the woods are calling to them. They feel this pull to go out into the wild, to get lost in nature.
The woods really are calling. But you shouldn't answer. You gotta turn around and walk away.
Don't let them trick you into thinking it's peaceful out there.
It's not peaceful. It's hungry.
Because they aren't calling you to visit.
They don't want you to just hike through and take some pictures. They want to keep you there permanently.
They're calling you home.
Back to the dirt. Back to the soil.
Don't let them take you. Just stay away from the trees.